One of the main products created from grains, such as wheat and oats, is flour. This means that when towns are founded away from railways, they usually have their own grain mills to turn their farmers' crops into flour to be distributed around the community. While many of these old mills have been lost to time, in Yorkton, its mill has not only survived, but continues to be reimagined in order to preserve its history. I'm Hayden DeGrow, and I'm the Culture and Heritage Specialist for the City of Yorkton. I love learning history, and teaching people about Yorkton's past is a proud part of my job. Join me as I highlight fascinating people, places, and events from Yorkton's history and take you where these places can be found today. This is Yorkton Retold. By 1899, it had been 8 years since Yorkton moved to its new site along the Canadian Pacific Railway. To accommodate the local farmers, a local brick plant owner, John J. Smith, decided to replace the original stone grist mill with a new one at the new site. Beginning in early 1900 and using bricks from his own plant, Smith built a 3-story tall building in order to house steel grinding rollers and their accompanying sifters, sorters, and baggers. Beside the mill, a classic wood crib elevator was erected to store the grain. What we see here is the remains of the rail spur that Canadian Pacific Railways agreed to build to connect their lines to the new mill. By harvest time of 1900, the mill was underway, grinding up local wheat into flour and selling it across eastern Saskatchewan under brand names such as North Star, Silver King, and Universal. Not even a year after it was built, Smith sold the mill to one of Yorkton's richest men, Levi Beck. Known as the Merchant Prince of Yorkton, Beck owned a significant amount of business throughout the town, and he was not to be left out of the milling industry. With his investment here, he owned a farm machinery business, a flour mill, and a grocery store, which meant farmers could stick with his businesses from planting to harvest. It was essentially Beck's own supply chain. Beck changed the brand of flour being sold to Northern Star flour. It would soon be renamed again to White Rose flour, a name that would become synonymous with Yorkton. On the outside, the mill building remained generally the same from then on, but its innards were far from. In 1912, Levi Beck upgraded the milling machinery inside, spending a modern day equivalent of nearly $140,000 on the project. While this was happening, Beck also bought an elevator in the nearby community of Yorkton, following a plan where wheat was graded at the elevators. The high quality wheat was stored in the elevators before being sent here to the mill to be ground, while the lesser quality wheat was shipped elsewhere to be used for other products, such as pasta and crop seeds. With these upgrades, the mill could produce 175 barrels of flour per day, making it one of the most productive flour mills in the province. Time went on, and while Yorkton became a city, the mill still operated as the community's biggest industry. During the 1910s, several more elevators rose up in the town, as seen in this photo. We can see the flour mill in its small elevator on the left, while 2 new elevators line the CPR lines. Both of these would not last long as they were torn down by the 1920s. Sadly, the Yorkton flour mill was also not immune to setbacks. In 1936, Levi Beck passed away at the ripe age of 75, leaving no heir to his businesses. While Beck's empire was dispersed, the mill was passed onto a group of shareholders that had come together to keep the mill going, who created the York Milling Company. This group included some of the next generation of business magnates for Yorkton, such as future mayor Charles Peaker. These shareholders, though 5 in number at first, was whittled down to just Keith Hallett by the end of World War II. To increase business operations, Hallett and his son Gordon built a new elevator, this one following the more modern wood crib elevator design of the day. The elevator was finished in 1947 and stayed with the mill for the remainder of operations. This shot shows us what the mill looked like in the 1950s, the bright white elevator highlighted by the company name, now updated to Yorkton Milling Company Limited, as well as the office buildings off to the side, an annex, which we see as the large white building in this shot from 2005, was added in 1957. Sadly, shortly after these additions were made, things truly began to go downhill for the mill. In 1935, the federal government of Canada established the Canadian Wheat Board, which became the only legal buyer of wheat in Saskatchewan. This added significant red tape and bureaucracies to the mill's operations, and while the CWB was willing to let the mill continue to operate, the money coming into Yorkton began to drop drastically. As the landscape of farming began to change, with long series of grain elevators giving way to small chain of grain terminals, agriculture switching from domestic market to an export market, and the rapid industrialization of flour making, the mill began to lose money. By 1975, Gordon Hallett had retired, and with that, the last dedicated worker of the mill left the business behind. For the first time in three-quarters of a century of operation, the grinders of the mill were still. Though efforts were made to restart the mill, it was never to last. In the 1980s, the federal government fired it back up as part of the Canadian Food Aid Program, with a $50,000 grant enabling the mill to produce grain and flour abroad. Sadly, this was not enough to revitalize the mill, and it remained silent, with only the elevator being reopened. Though the mill was designated a heritage property in Yorkton, it was only the mill itself that was saved from the wrecking ball. It's obviously clear that the elevator and surrounding buildings were demolished, and that took place in 2010. This is just a quick glimpse of what it looked like. This had happened after the city of Yorkton had seized the land due to unpaid taxes. This allowed the city to direct what happened to the site. Over the next few years, money was raised and studies were done to see what could be done for the mill. By the 2010s, it was decided to try and preserve the mill building. By 2014, the roof, windows, and doors were replaced to once again encapsulate the mill and protect it from the elements. From there, new grants were given and new funds were raised to restore the interior of the building. In 2022, after more than a decade of lobbying and laboring, tours of the mill's former workings were open to the public. This marked the first time the general public had been allowed inside the mill in nearly 50 years. In 2023, a new project was launched. After garnering nearly $2 million from local and government donors, the Yorkton Flour Mill Society, who had taken control of the mill from the city, began construction of the interpretive center you see right here. Modeled as a smaller version of the Canadian Pacific Railroad's passenger station that once served Yorkton, the interpretive center will expand the space of the mill's museum and celebrate the farming heritage of the Yorkton area. Today, the Yorkton Flour Mill remains the only brick flour mill left in Western Canada and stands as a symbol of Yorkton's long history. Reimagined from a simple industrial building to a beacon of historical pride, the Yorkton Flour Mill has been through a lot in its life. Offering a place for local farmers to turn their toils into profits, the mill today celebrates those long efforts. Founded on the farming of wheat and other grains, Yorkton and its flour mills show that agriculture has been and will forever be an important part of the fabric of life here on the prairies. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. See you next time, History Buffs!